And we're back once again, previewing week 2 in the NFL. This is Gerald coming right back at you here. It's, like I said, week 2 coming up right here in the NFL this weekend. It's getting, hot and heavy for fantasy football owners. And who better to break down this weekend in the NFL but my good friend? He is the man, myth, the legend behind the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt podcast. You got to listen to it today on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel that is available now on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different podcast networks. Our first show, actually our first couple shows have really done well. It's a credit to him and his insight. It is my good friend. It is Mr. Tyler Baker. The man who I took a loss from in week 1, but that's okay. I'll come back and win the season throughout.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit. It's a long season. The fantasy football season is a grind. Just stick to it. Be informed. Make good decisions. Go. You always have time to turn it around.
That you do. And not hitting the panic button, I think, after week 1, I think is something that we really wanted to focus on. There are little tweaks and things you could probably do to your roster. What are some of the things that you're doing or you're hearing are the best things that you might be, or you might want to consider for making some adjustments heading into week 2?
I didn't catch any of that. It kind of broke up quite a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So what are some of the adjustments that you think fantasy football owners might need to make heading into week 2? For most of the games, the bulk of the games are going to be played this weekend. So what are some of the adjustments you think fantasy football owners need to make in order to get better performances out of that team heading into week 2?
Sure. Well, you're going to want to watch the injury reports here on Friday. There are a couple guys that are questionable, Leonard Fournette being a big one. I think he's going to play. They took him out the first quarter of the game last week with a hamstring injury. The thing with the hamstring, you aggravate it, you get a longer time that you're going to be out. So they've been cautious with him. He hasn't been practicing this week, but I think he's going to play, but you will want to watch the Friday injury report. Also want to keep an eye out on Aaron Rodgers. If he toughed it out like an Iron Man the way that he did last week, I would assume that he is going to play this week. Now, a stat that's been coming out is that when Aaron Rodgers is in the shotgun, he's much more prone to go to Randall Cobb. So you don't want to bench Devontae Adams, but if you have Randall Cobb, you might want to consider playing him this week. In San Francisco, it doesn't look like Marquise Goodwin is going to play. Again, we'll have to wait for the Friday report. But if he doesn't, rookie third rounder Dante Pettis is a guy that you might want to sneak into your lineup. But what we definitely want to do is we want to react to some of these injuries. Now, in Carolina, their star tight end, Greg Olsen, he's out. Second-year wide receiver Curtis Samuels is also out. I think that's going to be a lot of targets for Christian McCaffrey. And as much as I don't like Devin Funchess as a wide receiver, he's going to get a lot of targets too. And Carolina is going to be going against the Falcons this weekend. That's a divisional matchup. There could be some fireworks there. Marcus Mariota also should play this weekend. I would expect a lot from Corey Davis with Delaney Walker being out. Jonnu Smith, his backup, can't quite do the things that Delaney Walker can do. So I'm looking at Corey Davis to probably get a lot of targets. In Tampa Bay, Deshaun Jackson, it looks like he is going to play, but they have a tough matchup, and that Ryan Fitzpatrick magic, I don't know if he's going to have the same magic against Philadelphia. That's a much tougher defense than they faced in week 1. So those are some of the things that I'm going to be looking at. Also want to keep an eye on the New England running back situation. Rex Burkhead did have a concussion, but he was at practice and he had pads on. If a guy has pads on and is taking part, even limitedly in practice, I would assume that he is going to play. If he is not going to play, James White is going to get a lot of targets because their rookie first rounder, Sony Michel, is not quite ready for action. connection. If you can maybe get Sony Michel on your team, I would recommend that because that backfield's in a little bit of trouble. Those guys are banged up, and when he's ready, you don't draft a running back in the first round not to play him.
Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Patriot Podcast. You got to check out his podcast today on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on all of our various podcast outlets. My friend, I remember there was a time not too long ago when Matthew Stafford was the hot pick as far as being the next name of the next great quarterback out there, the guy that's going to just rock whoever had them on their fantasy football team. I saw him even actually approaching the top 5 quarterbacks as recently as I think 2015 and 2016 as someone that was really on everybody's radar. What happened, man? What happened? Because he just looked god awful this past weekend.
He looked really bad, and I actually have him in a couple leagues. I'm a firm believer in waiting on quarterback. Either get
well, my condolences to you on that.
Yeah, I know. So I have quite a few shares of Matt Stafford, also Phillip Rivers. Now, Rivers did great. Stafford, it was terrible. He had a really, really bad game. There's some problems there with their coaching staff. The players are not happy with their new head coach. And I read somewhere where the Jets defense had figured out their signals. So when Stafford was signaling his receivers, they knew what he was calling. Now, 70% of the time, it's going to be a quick slant. That's just Matt Stafford's game. But maybe they can get some of that stuff figured out. And you know what? Week 1 is important because it's the first week that matters, but some of these teams are just rusty and they just weren't quite getting it together. I think Matt Stafford comes back around. I don't think he's as bad as he was last week. And I would also like to see that connection with Kenny Golladay continue. Golden Tate's probably not going to be with the team next year, so you're probably going to be looking at Marvin Jones Jr. and Kenny Golladay, and Kenny Golladay I think is the best receiver on that team, and I would expect that connection to flourish, and I think Matt Stafford's going to bounce back, and probably even this week against San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo is also coming off of a miserable game, so you have 2 quarterbacks that have had really miserable games, and I think both of them have a bounce back game.
For your sake, Matthew Stafford better do so.
He better. I'll fire off an email. You best believe it.
There you go. There you go. We're going to end our segment today on some buying or selling. I promised you that we hit some buy or sells. So if you're out there in the fantasy football league and you're thinking about either trading someone or picking someone up, this is a time we're going to throw out some names at you, and just you weigh in, Tyler, and let me know if it's something that if it's someone that you're gonna buy or sell on. Let's start off with Pittsburgh's James Conner. Buy or sell on James Conner?
Well, they took Le'Veon Bell off of the active roster now, or off of the depth chart. Now, that's not a super huge thing, but it looks like that this holdout, I would assume that if he doesn't come back soon, it could be later. Week 10 is what I'm hearing. James Conner did a really good job. If you can get him, buy him. But you're going to be paying a premium for him at this point because the cat's out of the bag. He had a really good week last week. And as far as like a long-term investment, I think you can at this point, now nobody knows, but I think at this point you can see James Conner as being an RB1 through at least the first half of the season.
Buy or sell Kenny Stills, which is truly funny in and of itself, the irony in there, because wasn't he didn't he get waived by the New England Patriots? Oh no, that was Kenny Britt. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So buy or sell Kenny Stills from Miami after a 2-touchdown performance from Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, I don't think the touchdowns can be a little fluky, but he's the number 1 receiver in that offense. buy. And you can probably still get him for cheap because people, just are not expecting a lot from Miami, probably not expecting a lot from Kenny Stills. I know I got him in a lot of drafts, and if you can get him at a decent price, go ahead and get him. I think he's an every week wide receiver too.
Buy or sell Tyrod Taylor. Someone who I've always, like I said, I thought as far as a safe quarterback that doesn't get you too many interceptions, won't get you a high number of touchdowns, but has a nice touchdown to interception ratio overall. Fair enough completion percentage, but always seems to be on the hot seat with another quarterback breathing right down his neck.
I know, poor Tyrod, and he's always going to get you some points on the ground too. I mean, you're probably looking at 50, 60 yards a game, just running. This weekend against New Orleans, I like him. He might even be a sneaky good DFS play. But when you get Tyrod Taylor, you get Tyrod Taylor. You're not going to feel comfortable every week playing him. Now, streaming, if you're streaming quarterbacks. I think this week against New Orleans is a good week to stream him. Plus, the more Josh Gordon is able to play and stay healthy, if they get that connection going, that can mean serious fantasy points.
Buy or sell Jared Cook after his tremendous performance against the Los Angeles Rams. Is he going to be the main focus of the Oakland Raiders offense? Because as many have alluded to in the John Gruden offense, we have now gone back into a time warp back into 1990.
It's weird. The Raiders are really, really weird right now. I have never been a Jared Cook believer for a long time. We've seen this from Jared Cook. He'll come out, he'll have a monster game, and you'll see the athleticism. The athleticism is just unreal with this guy. He had a great week last week. This week against Denver, I think Denver's defense gives up a lot to the tight end. I think Jared Cook has another good weekend this weekend. Then after that, I would sell just based on what he's done in the past. It seems like Jared Cook, he's so supremely physically gifted, but he just can't be in the right place at the right time, and not a good route runner. Maybe just doesn't quite pick up on things. But is John Gruden going to be the coach that helps the game make sense to Jared Cook? I don't think so. I think what we saw in week one was just Derek Carr very uncomfortable with the offense and unable to make the connection downfield with Amari Cooper. John Gruden even called him out on it in a press conference, which is pretty rare. So I think Jared Cook was kind of that safety blanket. You might see some more of that in Denver in week two. But after that, I would sell. I'm just not a Jared Cook believer.
Last buy or sell for you. That is going to be the defense of your favorite of mine, the Cleveland Browns. Are you buying or selling their output performance on Sunday? And do you think it will hold up over an entire season?
You know what? As much talent as they've been able to amass on that team with draft picks, I think the talent's there. I am not a believer in much of Cleveland Browns. I mean, everybody's only the Cleveland Browns can create a lot of buzz by tying their first game and not losing it. If it were any other team, we would probably not be that excited about a tie. Now, it was the Steelers, a perennial contender. But I don't think I'm buying much from the Browns. But we'll see. It's a new NFL season. We'll see.
Remember, ties are definitely like kissing your sister.
I know.
Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Patriot Podcast. Any last thoughts on the way out for week two? I mean, like I said, people should not hit the panic button as of yet. Mm-hmm. Yes, I did get destroyed by you in week one on our league, but I won another league as far as that game is concerned and had the highest performance. So it just seems like a couple choices here and a couple choices there can be the difference between a win or a loss. So you got to stay focused. And if you have enough confidence in your players, you'll probably get the job done here in week 2.
Sure. Well, I recommend people joining the Facebook group, Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast group on Facebook. You can ask lineup questions because the ESPN projections and the Yahoo projections are off most of the time. So if you've really got a question about a player, let me know and I'll give you any input that I have. But yeah, stay patient. It is a long grind of the season. And if you get off to a slow start, hey, I think it was 2 years ago, I had a 0-5 start in a league and came back and made the playoffs. So it's not over till it's over. Just stay informed, watch the practice reports, make sure you know who's going to play, who's not going to play. And if you don't have time for that, just ask me.
As the late dandy Don Meredith would do, he would actually sing when it's finally over. As far as those are for people out there who had who know their Monday Night Football, but we won't go there. That just ages me even more. But the party's over. Anyways, hopefully it won't be over for you this weekend in fantasy football, my friend. It is just great to hear from you as always. Going to check in with us on the Monday show to give us an update of what happened in week 2 in the NFL. Tyler, as always, it's so great to talk to you. And again, if you want our full episodes of the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast, where we go into more detail on various fantasy football subjects, just check it out. They are separate episodes on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 more podcast outlets. The first 3 weeks have been really good. Our fantasy football primer plus our episodes 1 and 2, they're already up. Next week is going to be episode 3. Just cannot wait for that. Tyler, it's all credit to you, man. Your knowledge, your skill, and your acumen when it comes to the fantasy football. That's the reason why it's getting it done.
Hey, man, I appreciate being part of the Pop Culture Cosmos. It's so much fun getting together with you and talking about fantasy football. Fantasy football is about having fun. And so playing it is fun, but it's even more fun to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry, Gerald. You can still have some fun.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Looking forward to better things this weekend in the NFL. Tyler, it's always great having you a part of the show, part of the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast, and of course, right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.